Okay, so this is part two. We're diving into the map of consciousness. Sorry, the first one got cut off. My phone ran out of storage. So, anyhow, we're talking about the map of consciousness, and now it's time to talk about the 300s on the scale. And the 300s are of the positive personality. So, 310 is acceptance and willingness, and 350 is forgiveness. No, sorry, forgiveness and acceptance is 350, 310 is willingness. But anyway, so the 300s in general are really interesting, are really fun. They're very charismatic, they're very influential. They make a lot of difference. They're always motivated by making a difference. So if you have customers in the 300s, you know it drives them. They are typically motivated by making global difference on a local scale versus the 400s are interested in making a difference on a global scale. But anyhow, what's also significant about the 300s is that they are of the emotional personality. What that means, they're subject to emotionalities, right? The rationality doesn't happen till the 405. And so the 300s is subject to emotional ups and downs. So for those of y'all who are in the 300s, you know, some of our clients, when we told them they were in the 300s, they didn't even believe because they deal with so many ups and downs. And when things go well, they feel great. When things don't go well, they don't feel great. So they had a hard time believing it, that they were in the 300s, because there is still so much negativity that pops up. However, the general, you know, your core motivation is, I suppose, what really does matter. And if it's acceptance and forgiveness, then we're in the high 300s, right? So yeah, so those are 300s. I'm going to read out some of the things that are interesting about the 300s, some specific calibrations. To convince calibrates at 330. So my dad is a convincer, right? So it's very charismatic. Persuaders calibrate at 335. Emotionally comforting personality is 350. Wisdom is at 385. And those are Dr. Hawkins calibrations. And then awesome leader is at 395. That, by the way, is my spiritual ego. It wants to be an awesome leader. It's great. But, you know, got to watch out for that. Emotional sensitivity is at 330, and that really goes with the 300s, especially the low 300s are very, very sensitive. We take everything personally, so it's something to watch out for. Now, let's talk about the 400s. So while 300s are of the emotional personality, the 400s are of the intellect. So the 400s, once you let go of enough and you move into the 400s, from the intellect, you're able to observe the personality. So you have a little bit more distance and space. When emotions are running the show, you begin to have the ability to observe it. And that's pretty radical, right? Where in the 300s, you were the experiencer. You were the emotions. When something is going on, there's drama, right? In the 400s, you're able to experience the emotions going through, and while, you know, grief is still grief, and anger is still anger, and hurt is still hurt, you have the ability and the capacity to observe it from the intellect, right? So people in the 400s are mostly driven by reason and intellect. They enjoy research, thinking, and spend a lot of time analyzing and in their intellect in general. So scientists, doctors, university professors, they all calibrate in the 400s. Now, per Hawkins research, Einstein, Freud, and Newton, they all calibrated at 499. So there's the limitation of the 400s, is that the thinkingness can only take you so far, right? Your intellect can only take you so far. It cannot take you to the spiritual realm or to the realm of love in the 500s. So there's times for these people in the 400s where there will be time where they have to surrender the addiction to the thinkingness and the analytical processing in order to make the jump to the 500s, right? So some of the benchmark or some of the marks of the 400s. 405 is when one starts becoming rational. 430, one develops in sophisticated intellectual opinions and positions. I think intellectual positionality is 435. 460 is somebody who starts to becoming a little erudite. 470 is true rationality, and 499 is brilliance and likelihood of genius. And that's from Hawkins, True versus Falsehood. It's a great book, by the way. So that's the 400s. It's possible to go through the 400s pretty fast. If you're interested in transcending the 400s, if you're just not attached to all the research and all the discovery and all the reasoning, you just hold it as provisional. And that, by the way, applies to the 300s and the 200s. So wherever you are, whatever your current positionality is, that is defining your current level of consciousness. So long as you can observe it and hold it as provisional, you're going to have a fairly easy time transcending it, but you really have to hold it as provisional and not get attached to it, right? Okay, so moving into the 500s. 500 is level of love, and 540 is the level of unconditional love. 4% of the world reaches 500, but only about 0.4%, so a tiny, tiny percentage, reaches the level of unconditional love at 540. So, going over a level 500 is difficult. It's difficult emotionally, it's difficult spiritually. Because at this level, one starts identifying with his or her proximate field and his or her aura rather than the body. And one starts noticing the intrusions that happen in one's aura, or the spiritual attacks, or the entities and attached entities and this and that. And we started experiencing things that were not experienced in the 300s and the 400s. You know, what we call spiritual attacks barely happens in the 300s. It's about 10 minutes a day, and it's barely noticeable. In the 500s, it becomes hours a day at first when one crosses over through the 500s, right? Because now you become the meat to the lower astral, right? To the negative energies, right? Because now you start becoming pretty important as you go over the 500. So, experientially, the 500s vary from person to person, right? It's also common, and it happened to me several times, to go into the 500 and then fall back down because we're not ready for it. It's a very difficult time going over 500, at least from what I've experienced. When I went down and back up to again and down, and then dealing with some grief, then way down. So it's like you get a sense of what it's like, but it takes a lot of surrendering, a lot of hard work to actually stay there in the long term. But anyway, so yeah, that's about 500. You know, one's biggest motivation is love. It's no longer pride. It's no longer the charm of the personal. It's no longer the intellect. It's really love and being of service to others and so on, and unconditional love and having acceptance for all human beings. And then there's level 600 and above, and only a very, very, very small people. I think we got by calibrations currently 30 or so in the world. You know, you see statistics, it's like 4,000. That's just not what it is. You know, it's somewhere between 20, 30, 40 in the world that currently are at the consciousness level 600 or above. And that's enlightenment, right? So it's very, very rare to be enlightened. It's much more likely to reach the level 540 of unconditional love. And then even more rare to go beyond and to reach the levels closer to 1,000, right? However, it is possible, right? For the first time in history, we have a lot of access to materials, whether it's the Course in Miracles, which calibrates at 600, the workbook at least calibrates at 600, the textbook's at 550. I have not read the textbook, I just do the workbook. Alcoholics Anonymous and Al-Anon 12-step groups. Calibrate, I forget if it's a 540 or 560. I go to Al-Anon every day, and it is Al-Anon is like the counterpart of Alcoholics Anonymous, which is for families who have it's supposed to provide support for families of alcoholics. But my primary reason for going wasn't so much to have problems with alcoholics around me, but because they followed the 12-step program, which calibrates very, very high. It's in the 500s. While most of the coaching programs up there that I've participated in and the coaches do not reach the level of 500, right? So I was interested in participating in that because just being in that environment is very different than, living a day-to-day life. So those 12-step groups are motivated by unconditional love. So it's quite wonderful. It's quite wonderful. All right, so that would be, anyway, so that would be levels 500 and 600. So I hope that gives you a good overview of the map. I would look at it. There's also, if you Google full calibration list and things like that online, it will give you all kinds of things that have been calibrated. It's really cool to look at it because you can look at different companies where they calibrated, anything from Walmart to Home Depot, different politicians, different historic figures, different events. From spiritual perspective, it's quite interesting because you can look at where different scriptures calibrate and different religions. Right, so before you get into, reading different scriptures, it's good to look up, okay, this translation calibrates here, this translation calibrates over there. So you start getting a sense of what you should or shouldn't follow, right? So I hope this is helpful, and that's it for the overview. And then the next video, we're going to dive into some of the specifics of the negative ego structures that are below 200 that one needs to surrender to start going up in consciousness. And the ones we're going to be talking about came up over and over with our students or our clients that we were working with, and when we were calibrating, okay, what does this person need to surrender, right? So it was the same structures. And it was for me too. I had to do my own surrendering of those structures. I'm going to share some of my very personal stories too. So get ready for that. And I will see you in the next video.